Welcome to Beautiful Ugly by Alice Feeney. Because nothing says celebration like a missing wife, a cliffside phone call, and a career milestone that immediately becomes emotionally useless. Before we jump back into the story, just a quick moment of honesty. These videos run on caffeine, late nights, and pure chaos, but we love every second of it. If our over-the-top humor and dramatic recaps are your thing, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. It helps us keep the madness going and tells YouTube we're not just screaming into the void. Stick around, join the fun, and help our tiny corner of the internet grow. Now, let's get back to it. The story opens in London, where author Grady Green is having one of those nights writers fantasize about, sitting at home, waiting for his agent to confirm he's officially made it. The call comes. Grady is now a New York Times best-selling author. Confetti should fall from the ceiling, champagne should pop. Instead, the only thing missing is, inconveniently, his wife. Abby Goldman isn't home. She's working late. Because of course she is. Grady calls her to share the news, needing validation from the one person who matters more than the publishing industry. Abby answers and says she's close to home. Everything feels normal. Too normal, which in a psychological thriller is basically a red flag waving directly at the reader. Then Abby stops the car on a cliff road and tells Grady there's a body in the street. Not metaphorically, not emotionally. An actual body. She gets out to check. The phone line stays open. Grady keeps talking. Abby stops responding. Silence replaces her voice. And just like that, the celebration becomes a full-blown nightmare. Grady runs outside, shouting her name into the night like, that's ever helped anyone in fiction. Abby is gone. No car, no body, no answers, only an unresolved disappearance that will quietly ruin everything. And yes, this is only the beginning. A year after Abby's disappearance, Grady Green is still doing terribly, emotionally, creatively, and frankly as a human being. He hasn't written a new book, which is inconvenient when writing books is literally his job. His agent summons him to her office, where she does what agents do best, attempt damage control with a smile and a solution that definitely won't backfire. Kitty suggests Grady retreat to a remote cabin she inherited from the late author Charles Whitaker. The cabin sits on the Isle of Amberley in the Scottish Highlands, a place so isolated it practically screams psychological unraveling. Charles famously lived and wrote there, producing a respected body of work before dying, making his cabin the obvious choice for a grieving, blocked author who should absolutely not be left alone with his thoughts. Grady immediately agrees. Healing, after all, is just distance plus alcohol. At the Scottish port, reality sets in. The ferrywoman, Sandy McIntyre, cheerfully informs Grady that cars aren't allowed on the island. He's stuck there with a few bags and his dog, which should feel symbolic, but mostly feels inconvenient. Still, he boards the ferry. No turning back now, literally or metaphorically. Upon arrival, Sandy offers him a ride to the cabin. During the drive-through the small island town, Grady spots a woman who looks exactly like Abby. She isn't Abby, but the resemblance is close enough to trigger immediate emotional whiplash. Sandy brushes it off. Grady does too, because denial is his coping mechanism of choice. The cabin itself is cozy, quiet, and unsettling in that charming, dead author's sanctuary way. Sandy invites Grady to dinner with her and her sister Midge the next night, then leaves him alone. Grady pours himself a drink, then another, then discovers something far more dangerous than whiskey, an unpublished manuscript by Charles Whitaker. Instead of doing the ethical thing, like not reading it, Grady stays up all night devouring the manuscript. Inspiration strikes. Or more accurately, theft does. The next day, Grady sends Kitty a book proposal based entirely on Charles's unpublished idea, lightly reframed as his own brilliant comeback. Professional integrity quietly exits the room. As Grady explores the island, he notices the locals watching him with mild suspicion, though he chooses not to dwell on it. Back at the cabin, strange things begin happening. Noises. Envelopes slipped under his doors. Inside them are old newspaper articles from the early days of Abby's journalism career. Personal, specific, and absolutely not random. Grady ignores all of it. He's got a book to write after all, and nothing fuels creativity quite like stolen ideas and creeping paranoia. Grady settles into island life the way any emotionally fragile writer would, by isolating himself, drinking heavily, and pretending that none of the increasingly alarming things happening around him matter. His days blur together in the cabin as he writes obsessively, convinced that if he just focuses hard enough, everything else, the noises, the envelopes, the past, will politely disappear. Sleep, however, is not cooperating. Grady can't rest, no matter how much alcohol he consumes. The local shop owner, Cora Christie, offers him bog myrtle tea to help with his insomnia. It doesn't work. Shocking. So Grady continues stumbling through sleepless nights, his grip on reality loosening one whiskey glass at a time. Sandy eventually gives him access to a car, granting him the rare luxury of mobility. When he ventures out, Grady keeps seeing women who look like Abby. Not once, not twice, repeatedly. Each time, he dismisses it as exhaustion or grief or his brain's personal vendetta against him. The possibility that something stranger might be happening is filed neatly under things to ignore. So, when Grady finally finishes editing the manuscript, he convinces himself he's transformed Charles Whitaker's idea enough to call it his own. With that moral hurdle successfully cleared in his mind, he mails the draft to Kitty and heads to the local pub to celebrate his triumph over originality. This is where things go downhill, faster than Abby's car stopped on that cliff road. The pub keeper casually informs Grady that Charles and Sandy were close friends. Very close. So close, in fact, that Charles let Sandy read all of his drafts. All of them, including the unpublished manuscript for Book 10. The exact manuscript Grady just repurposed and mailed to his agent like it wasn't radioactive. Panic sets in. Grady drives out to Darkside Cave where he finds Sandy meditating by the water, mourning her daughter Isla, who died years earlier. When confronted, Sandy calmly confirms what Grady desperately hoped wasn't true. She read everything Charles ever wrote. She knows the manuscript. She knows what Grady did. Grady doesn't argue. He doesn't confess. He doesn't apologize. He does what he does best. He runs. On the drive back, rattled and unfocused, Grady hits a woman walking along the road. She looks exactly like Abby. This time, though, she doesn't vanish. She doesn't fade into the background. She gets up, confused but alive, and introduces herself as Aubrey Fairlight. Grady soon discovers that this woman, who looks like his dead wife, has no memory of him. She's married to a woman named Travers Fairlight. She has a baby daughter named Holly, and the life she's living on the island is one Abby never mentioned. Grady realizes, far too late, that Abby didn't just disappear. She had a history here, one she never shared. After meeting Aubrey, who is very much Abby but also absolutely not playing along, Grady's carefully constructed version of reality collapses. She doesn't recognize him, doesn't react like a traumatized missing wife, and definitely doesn't behave like someone who accidentally wandered into a new life. Grady spirals, as one does. He starts to piece together that Abby had a past on the Isle of Amberley she never told him about. A childhood, connections, roots. The island wasn't just a random refuge. It was familiar. Overwhelmed, confused, and finally uncomfortable with not being in control of the story, Grady decides he needs to leave the island immediately. Naturally, this is when the island decides that's not happening. As he packs his things, Grady runs into Sandy, Abby, and Kitty in town. Yes, Kitty is there now too, which should have been alarming all on its own. The women stop him before he can make his escape, and Abby finally drops the act. She remembers everything. Abby reveals that she is Abby, that she grew up on the island, and that her disappearance wasn't an accident, it was an escape. On the night she vanished, Abby didn't find a body in the road by coincidence. Grady was the body. He staged it. When Abby got out of the car to help him, he attacked her and threw her over the cliff. She survived. Pregnant at the time, Abby fled to Amberley to disappear for good. She had planned to tell Grady that night that she was leaving him. Their marriage had been slowly suffocating her. Grady emotionally distant, dismissive of her desire to have children, and unwilling to truly see her. So Abby made a decision. She secretly underwent IVF, got pregnant, and chose a life that belonged to her. Kitty steps in to deliver the verdict. Grady won't be arrested. He won't be forgiven. He will stay on the island forever. As penance, Grady will become the resident author. He will write books, donate all proceeds to the Island Trust, and help ensure Amberley never has to open itself to tourism. Cut off. Contained. Useful. Grady agrees, because when every escape route is gone, compliance starts to feel like redemption. 1 year later, Grady Green is thriving, or at least he thinks he is. He's fully settled into life on the Isle of Amberley, embraced his role as the island's resident author, and convinced himself that this arrangement counts as a second chance rather than a very creative prison sentence. He writes, he contributes, he behaves, and most importantly, he no longer tries to leave. Grady tells himself he's made peace with everything that happened, with Abby, with the truth, with the fact that his freedom now comes with conditions and supervision. In his version of events, he's earned this life. He's grown. He's better. He's even happy. Abby, meanwhile, remains just out of reach. Present, watchful, and emotionally untouchable, Grady frames this distance as love taking a new shape, something quieter and more evolved. He believes she cares for him. He believes the island has accepted him. He believes the past is behind him, which is exactly when Alice Feeney reminds the reader that belief is Grady's greatest weakness. One night, Grady goes to bed feeling content, thinking of Abby and the strange sense of belonging he's found on Amberley. He falls asleep calm, reflective, and certain that this story, at last, has resolved itself. He wakes up in total darkness. At first, Grady assumes he's disoriented. Then he realizes he can't move. There's no air, no space, no sound, just wood pressing in on all sides. He understands too late that he's inside a coffin. The islanders have buried him alive. No explanation, no confrontation, no final speech, just silence and the slow, terrifying realization that the oxygen is running out. This is the island's justice. Quiet, efficient, and permanent. Beautiful ugly ends without redemption. No rescue, no forgiveness, just consequences. And the final twist lands where it always was waiting. Grady was never the victim of this story. He was the ugly truth buried at its center. And that's Beautiful Ugly by Alice Feeney. A love story, a mystery, and a very clear reminder not to fake your own death, steal manuscripts, or marry someone who's 10 steps ahead of you emotionally. If you enjoyed this summary, don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the bell, and leave a comment. And remember, on the Isle of Amberley, writer's block is temporary, but being buried alive is forever. See you next time, little schemers!